Human rights activists say this festive season will not be the same for families and miners trapped in Stilfontein. They have appealed to faith-based leaders and organizations to show spiritual solidarity with the illegal miners. As Christmas and Hanukkah approach, activists and families say they cannot celebrate while the miners remain in darkness and starving. Activists of the plight miners reflects the deep failures of society, the mines, the state and the courts to uphold basic human rights and dignity. They say the tragedy echoes the horrors of Marikana, where greed and disregard for life created one of South Africa's darkest chapters. Right, let's expand on the conversation. We're joined by human rights defender Tauriq Jenkins, who expands on this conversation. Tauriq, a very good evening to you. Thank you for your time. As we learn and are well aware that hundreds of miners remain underground, with many said to be in a critical condition, what kind of situation does this present as you observe what's happening at the moment?
Thank you very much for having me. What I've observed and what's plain to see is that unfolding is a humanitarian disaster. Currently trapped underground are between 300 and 1,000 miners who are subject basically to what appears to be a calculated and orchestrated stratagem by law enforcement and the authorities in terms of restricting access and exits to and from the mine, but most importantly, supplies and food. There is a situation of mass starvation that is currently unfolding, and the reports are incredibly severe. Today, 2 letters were retrieved from miners describing the conditions down under, to the point where dead bodies are also being used as means of sustenance. And so I think we are sitting with a very severe humanitarian crisis, and I think there is a need for immediate rescue efforts by the state and mining companies to alleviate this situation. There's been a call to faith-based leaders and organizations all over looking for a immediate relief, especially in terms of food and supplies, and also support for the existing community volunteers who have been painstakingly engaged on a day-to-day basis using their own technologies in makeshift ways in order to rescue the miners.
We know that an urgent application brought by mining affected communities United in Action has been dismissed, which was ready to force the court to force the state, to provide humanitarian aid, including medication, food and water. What was such an outcome, in your view, indicative of when you look at what the court has declared?
Well, while the court has affirmed that the miners' rights are there to receive humanitarian aid, and in fact they acknowledge that they are trapped with no alternative source of sustenance, it may certainly have erred in failing to affirm any responsibility in terms of the state's duty and obligation to protect this right. The state bears the responsibility to ensure that the trapped miners have the right of life to be upheld. And the crisis has been precipitated by a number of things, including the lack of implementation by the Department of Minerals and Petroleum Resources, the failure to enforce a proper mine closure regulations, which in fact has allowed the mining companies to essentially leave the mine unrehabilitated and improperly closed. So, this mine has stopped operating since 2015, and almost a decade later, this mine remains unrehabilitated. So what we see at the moment is a severe situation where human life is being lost, and that underground there is a mass starvation tragedy that is unfolding. And I think that it's absolutely important for the reality to hit the ground, and for people to understand that if an immediate intervention to alleviate this situation is not pushed and is not maintained, we are going to see an incredible catalytic loss of lives over the next short period.
What approach do you think needs to be taken here? I mean, we did see police, guarding the place, looking to arrest anyone who comes to the surface, but food was initially sent down to the miners underground. What would an ideal rescue plan look like in your view?
Well, right now the most important thing is to get food down into the shafts. The community has run out of resources, and the situation is incredibly dire. Ideally, what we would need is an integrated plan with the community in terms of getting the food down there as quickly as possible, including medication. And secondly, to engage in a rescue operation process, which would involve a team of people that would also enhance and improve the kind of technologies that are already being deployed by the community volunteers in order to fast track the retrieval of miners that are trapped below.
We're also learning, I mean, as you speak about underground communication that has been made, we're also learning that while hundreds of men, of course, are believed to still be underground, they are caught between police and gangs operating underground. One community leader has referred to this as a case of double victimization. What is your knowledge of that? Because we've also heard of stories, reports of how some of the men said that they had been hired as casual workers, laborers, unaware that this would lead to a situation which is really some of the world's deepest and most dangerous mining mines underground, where they were completely unaware, thinking that they were going to go to, a job that was not half as dangerous as what they're enduring.
Yes, certainly there's been feedback in terms of the extent to which people within this community have been coerced or have been fallen victim to a kind of syndication in terms of a criminalized network that is in operation. However, I think it is also important to acknowledge that this is an existing kind of economy that has been in operation for a decade, and I think it's very correct for them for this description of being a double tragedy, a double criminalizing process that is happening. And I think what we're seeing is a situation where there's a kind of reasoning that not only disregards the principles of human dignity and justice, but we must be very careful in terms of the kind of precedent that is being set, where the protection of life can be overshadowed by the narrow imperatives of certain aspects. And I think while the court judgment has gone ahead, I think a number of entities, including the communities and the leading entity involved on the ground, Makua, unequivocally have condemned the decision, which appears to abdicate the responsibility to hold the state to account for the protection of human rights for minors. And the court's decision essentially turned on the unfounded claim that the police did not have an obligation to provide humanitarian aid, even if they themselves have caused this situation. And if they, have also detained individuals and others who may need assistance. And I think one of the troubling issues that we're facing as well is how certain whistleblowing miners who have been critical in terms of the forming of the affidavit that was put, in the court case, have been disallowed their legal representatives. In this case, it's Lawyers for Human Rights, and this certainly is an obstruction, which is unlawful.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks for speaking to us this evening, weighing in on the conversation. Human rights defender Tauriq Jenkins expanding there on some of his thoughts as hundreds or perhaps thousands of miners are still trapped or underground in some believed to be in a critical condition in Stilfontein.